Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our Lunch and Learn. We're going to start now. We'll be recording this this Lunch and Learn, and we expect to post it on our website either later today or tomorrow if for some reason you want to go back and look it over. I'm Tony Ross, Director of Communications at Provalis Research. You can see me now, but I would ask everybody to please keep your cameras off. Just because it can be a distraction for other people. Before I introduce our presenter, if there are people in the audience today who would like to present their work through our Lunch and Learn series and have an instructive way to use our software, please contact us through the Contact Us section of our website. The title of today's presentation is Using the Unusual to Improve Content Analysis Research. Our presenter is Dr. Abby Jones. Abby has 10 plus years of experience with QDA Miner and WordStat. Her expertise includes design and analysis combined with teaching research methods at 4 universities to offer customized research services. Abby also offers consulting, research design, and training services through her company, AJ Research. Her contact information you can see will be on her slides. She will also take your already obtained information, such as focus group responses, news coverage, or large documents, and return a professionally written research report to you. At the end of the presentation, if you wish to ask questions, please send them to us through the chat feature at the right of your screen. We'll take as many as time allows. And now, I'll turn the presentation over to Abby.
Good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, wherever you happen to be. We're not seeing everybody, but I know you're all out there. Tony introduced me, so I'm not going to talk a lot about myself. As he said, I run a company called AJ Research. I also currently teach at Rutgers University, where I teach master's students. I got my PhD at GW, which is where my Provalis research world started. I think about 12 years ago, I was trying to decide about that last night. Maybe Normand has a better idea when he met my advisor. And today I am going to try to share some of the tricks of the trade and unusual ways that I have learned and my colleagues have learned to use Provalis research to create the strongest and most valid research, because that's what you're always looking for, the strongest and most valid and usable research you can create. So I'm going to start there. Hold on. Okay. As researchers, we all have patterns and habits that certainly have impact on the validity and even the usefulness of our research findings. Moreover, many of us have teachers and mentors that definitely came up in their careers when computerized, systemized research tools not only did not exist, but they couldn't even envision them. Right? I'm 46, and I couldn't envision when I was even 16 a cell phone. So think about that. I had one of the most amazing PhD advisors, and he is very innovative, and he was the one who found Normand and Provalis at a conference and brought it back to us at George Washington, and he pushed us to use it. But I think deep down there, he prefers doing research deductively with a code book on an Excel sheet. So today, we're all very lucky to have tools that allow us to move beyond our preconceived notions and our assumptions, and instead let the materials in a way speak for themselves. I joke with clients and undergrads certainly all the time that I know a few, right? Laugh at, but I say just stop thinking you know what the data will say before you listen. Take your turn and listen. So today I'm going to touch on a few methods that I use to create data out of content, data being the findings, content being what you put in. I will call them, as I said, tricks of the trade. I've been a Provalis user forever, and I've worked on a few things. I actually set aside time each week. And if you're a Provalis user, I would really recommend it to improve on my skills, right? To try different techniques when it really doesn't matter. Again, I would suggest this. So today I'm going to talk about taking your time, filtering your data, and those pesky quotes that are a little hard to find. Okay, So in so many ways, it may sound a bit obvious, but having worked with several clients in several different industries, actually, and more graduate students than I would like to admit, I have truly come to believe that one of the biggest errors that happens in projects is that we move far too fast towards wanting immediate findings. I get it. I was a PhD student who made every professor in the department look at her pretty charts that she had been working on forever. But instead, we need to slow down and get to know our data. For all there are stories about people, proposing on that first or second date, if I did that and later found out the guy was a Yankees fan, well, for me, a huge Red Sox fan with an overly obsessed Red Sox family, this would have been a problem. So waiting and asking about baseball would have been good. Keep me from sleeping in the garage. The same is true of your data. You have to take the time. You can't rush towards findings. So no matter what the project I'm working on, for whatever client I'm working for, I start by putting my content into WordStat and using the inductive tools to explore. Again, here I'm not looking to immediately code or chart or have beautiful results. Not today, maybe not even tomorrow, but just trying to get a much better idea of what is there. On the right here, you will see the project I did this summer that I'm going to use as for demonstration purposes. It was looking at the media coverage of the Texas abortion debate, as it said. Here's the dates and the news sources. It was a pretty standard content analysis project, but actually turned out to be very interesting too. So as I said, I'm not lying when I say that the first thing I do with all my content is to put it into the frequency tool. I don't create a dictionary immediately. I don't look to chart it. I just use that very nice frequency tool. So here we see a lot of political and journalism words in the data. Pretty standard. This is kind of, I wasn't surprised by any of this. It looked pretty standard. I didn't run towards it, but I had an idea of what was there. Keep this in mind later as we'll come back to it. One thing you should always remember, and my favorite feature of Provalis, even in comparison to lots of other programs I've tried, is that you can always, no matter where you are, right-click and see the content in context of your findings. So here, I was curious about the finding of Mississippi. I was looking at the Texas abortion debate. So why was there Mississippi there? And why was it so prominent? Again, I'm just exploring and taking tons of time to look at it, and actually tons of notes on my yellow legal pad. Yeah, old school, but it works for me. I highly recommend it. This is also a great moment to look at the differences between frequency of words and the number of cases and percentage of cases. Again, here a case was an article. So I'm going to share a story. I was once at a conference, and a young scholar who uses Provalis put up a chart just like this. And the word rice was third on the list. He was exploring media coverage of Africa food projects. And he was excited. Rice is very bad for people. He explained why. He went on and on, rice and rice and rice. But I looked across the chart, and while the frequency was high, the number of cases was 2. Okay, out of 160 articles. So at the end, I nicely and politely, I promise, went up and talked to the young scholar. And I tried to explain to him that while it had a high frequency, 2 articles, especially he had 8 news sources, meant that most people did not see those news stories. One of them was in the New York Times, and I explained to him probably not on the cover. So you have to think about the difference, and this is a great moment to do it, between frequency and cases. Similar to how I always start with frequency, I then move on to look at phrase frequency. Here, we actually see a combination of looking at the list, which is interesting, but not shocking, and looking at the difference between frequency and cases. So Liz Cheney, Greg Abbott, Kevin McCarthy, 3 big political players, right? Well, Liz Cheney mentioned 78 times was only in 22 cases, 22 articles. But Greg Abbott was in 50, well, he only had 59. He was in 45 cases, which meant that more people saw him in more articles and associated him with this story. That's an important difference when you think about content analysis. And Prevalis offers you a wonderful chance to compare the two and not jump to what I call the rice assumption. And all my clients have heard that rice story. So I'm sorry if my clients are on here and they've heard that story probably 2 or 3 times from me, because I constantly remind them of that. So I admit I could go farther and farther and farther here, but I think you all get the idea of that the WordStat inductive tools can be used not only for dictionary building, coding, and wonderful image creation, oohing and ahhing at conferences, but exploratory tools that can help you break your routines and leave behind your assumptions. Here you see a dendrogram, and my favorite, a proximity plot. I'm a big fan of proximity plots. They both help you think about your data. They both help you think about how to move forward with your project. Take a lot of notes, drop away your assumptions. One last exploratory tool I want to offer you is that you can combine the WordStat inductive tools and QDA computer learning tools to truly know your content at a deeper level. So let me tell you quite an embarrassing story, but I think it'll help. One time I was on the Metro, because I went to school at George Washington University, so the DC Metro, and I read a story, an economic story. And there were several metaphors and comparisons to sports and weather analogies. Well, I love sports and weather. I'm kind of a weather geek. So I quickly was excited about this story. I walked into the department, I walked into my advisor's office and excitedly said, I wanted to do a project for my independent study, looking at economic stories and how they used sports and weather analogies. All from this one article I had read. I think you guys know where this is going. I went through the process. I collected all the articles. I got them ready for Prevalis. I did the coding. I did the reading. I did all the work. We're talking weeks and weeks here. And I had no findings. There were a few articles that used either weather or sports analogies. Maybe the original writer was like me, a weather geek and a sports fanatic. But if I had collected an accurate, corpus of data, which I'm pretty good at, and looked then at whether there were similar paragraphs using the QDA tools, it would have saved me a lot of work, and my advisor would have been much happier with me because he was not. So look at that paragraph. That's the Mississippi paragraph that I was interested in. Then I put that paragraph into the query by example back in QDA. Pretty simple. I looked at it in terms of paragraphs. And here we see the findings from using the interesting Mississippi paragraph, including references, importantly, to other states, such as Idaho and Arkansas. So here I had a finding. Here I had something interesting. And if I went to my advisor and said, I want to look at, and I want to do a research project based on looking at other states and how they're used in articles, and I want to go across states. So I want to look at Idaho and see if they're using Mississippi and maybe Texas. I want to look at Arkansas and see if they're talking about South Carolina policy. I would have a basis for that project, not just my nice metro trip and the article I loved. And at the end of this, I'd probably have a happier advisor who didn't think I had wasted my time. So here's the big deal here. Don't assume. Use the interesting tools that we have available to get to know your data. Just don't simply enter the content and rush to the findings. The tools are great. They do that. And believe me, I love the graphs and the charts. They're what get the oohs and ahs at the conferences. Yet, isn't the goal to produce accurate and useful data and to use our tools the best ways we know how? That's what I'm trying to do today, is show you how to use the tools a little bit, right? To stop rushing, stop forcing the content to fit your assumptions, or worse, if you're missing something, right? Then you have wasted your time also. That missing thing is important to me. So that's why I decided to try to use the tools this way. I want to use the tools to make sure I am not missing something. For the second part of my presentation today, I want to talk about using the Provalis tools also in innovative ways, but this way you will use them to narrow down your content. As the slide says, up till now, we have been looking at larger news stories, but I strongly believe this might not be getting at the frames and narratives or models that we all use to really tell us the story of what the coverage said. It's easy to look at the big picture, but sometimes we have to work harder and look closer. So I know a lot of us love all those bells and whistles that the programs offer, right? I've been known to sit for longer than I'd like to admit, playing with content and seeing what I can create, all those pretty pictures. I'm trying to understand the math better, all of that. But I'm not lying when I say that you should be digging deeper into your content, and that text retrieval tools, the simple text retrieval tools, can be your best friend at this. I think for a long time I let this go by. I also, that bells and whistles thing. So here you see me searching for abortion with the star, so it catches all the connotations of it and all its forms. And here are my results. At this spot, even though I am just at the start of the process, I almost always code these paragraphs. Almost more as a safety valve kind of thing, I think, but just to be sure it is useful, where searching and coding come together, make sure I know what I have. So but the greatest thing that you can do at this spot is that you can save the search, and it literally becomes a new corpus of data that you can use, and even open it in WordStat. Here I save it as an Excel file, pretty simple. Between all of us, a friend of mine found out I had this paragraph data. He's a dorky researcher like me, and was so excited. And in trade for a few dinners, well, more than a few, I gave it to him. A separate corpus of just paragraphs that contain the word abortion. It's its own corpus now, completely separate. Okay. Also, because you coded the new paragraphs, see how smart you were? You can retrieve them. And then use the button up at the top, right here, where my arrow is. You can take your new corpus of data right into WordStat and begin to examine it. Don't forget to save it. But it's easy. It's so simple. You can go, oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. You can go right here and we'll ask you to move your data, if you want to move your data into WordStat. This can save you going in circles, but again, don't forget to save. Here we see a totally new frequency chart. Instead of the top words being political and journalistic, we see words that relate to abortion and the debates that surround it. Because again, exploring your data is very important. One of the interesting differences is the presence of conservative on the second, but not the first list. Not at the top there. Now, yes, we had 138 news articles in our first group and 769 paragraphs in our second, but the rankings and percentage features of frequency take this into account as we compare. So we're using both this exploratory idea of continuing to explore our data and the filtering down of our data, right? Using a simple text search and then coding and then retrieving to get to a very interesting idea. I also ran a proximity chart on the new corpus. I can't seem to help myself when it comes to the proximity charts. I know I quickly ran by the proximity chart for the first content due to time, but I can say that at the top of the list was similar. Courts and states and row and Mississippi is there. But as you move down the list, here you see a great deal more of those more directly related abortion terms, a little bit more of those words that make the debate, like restrictions, makes the debate a hotter debate, more controversial, providers. So we see that we're getting closer to results that may truly tell us a narrative. And being able to compare the two is a very interesting idea. Another way you can limit your data that will lead to greater validity in your findings is that at any point in the process, again, Provalis is amazing, it does this, you can filter any attribute or value of a variable. So if I was truly only interested in local coverage, I could limit the content to only that from the Austin Statesman. So you'd have abortion paragraphs from the Austin Statesman. Pretty specific. Maybe that doesn't seem useful to you. It's too specific. But remember my friend who was using the data, that guy who had to buy me more than a few dinners? That's what he's doing. He is comparing abortion debate coverage across local news outlets all across the country. I'm telling you, his project is really interesting. I look forward to him publishing it, and hopefully we can maybe even share it on the Provalis site. Here's the deal. You're truly only limited by your desires to dig into the data. And that's what I really wanted to get at today. The key is to use the tools you have available, not only in the obvious ways, but in creative ways that help research progress. And I hope that when you figure out some things that you'll share them with me too, because I always love new ideas. Most of the ideas I shared today came from discussions with colleagues and work with colleagues to try to figure out how we could best do our research together. Again, it's not that a truly deductively created codebook with an Excel sheet that you're working on can't give you the results. They will. But I would question the validity, particularly when it comes to forcing codes, which I think all researchers have done at one point or another, or again, what you might be missing. How do you know what you're going to find at the bottom of the hole if you assume you know already? Okay, so I had truly planned to talk about quote searching today, but it's a larger conversation, and although I may talk fast, and I know I do, I couldn't talk fast enough to fit it all in. Tony would have surely and rightly cut me off. Rather, I'd like to answer some of your questions and use my time to do that. But to give you an idea, I would have talked about how you use phrase finder, right, to locate names, how to create a dictionary out of those names and adding pronouns, including those that have been rightly added recently, like they, to express an individual. Then I would show you how to use the rules feature in the WordStat dictionary to locate quotes. This is a system and there's a bit more to it, so there's more details, that colleagues and I worked to devise for a huge project that we were doing at QW when we were not really sure how to figure out the quotes thing. So we worked on it and got pretty good results that I'll show. Okay, so here's the deal. I'm going to share this lesson on my website, on my Facebook site. You can email me to get it. I'll be happy to send it back to you. I always love getting emails from new friends. And starting tonight, give me a chance to put it up. It's almost done. So give me a chance to put it up, and I'll be happy to share it with you on how to find those pesky quotes that I know my friends and I, probably Nirmand has some great system that we didn't ask about. We should have probably, but we found a system that we have been using for a little while and it works pretty well. And I'd be happy to share it with anybody. So I want to thank you for your time today. I really enjoyed speaking to you, and I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. If anybody has any questions, please use the chat feature on the right-hand side of your screen and type it in. Is your website, here's one, is your website spelled right? You have 2 E's in research. 2 E's, R-E-S-E-A-R-C-H.
Maybe there's a mistake.
The last slide did, okay.
My slide just went blank, I'm sorry. Research, is that wrong?
R-E-S-E-A, looks like spelled correctly to me.
Yeah, isn't that how you spell research?
Yeah, that's how I spell it.
Okay.
Any other questions not related to spelling? Any other questions to Abby about her research, what she's doing? Okay. How do you use the TDIF value to further corral some of your choices? It's from Jonathan.
I will be honest, it's not one that I use very often to think about the research. I do some comparison to TF-IDF, but I will admit it's not a feature I use as often when comparing across data. It's weighted, right, by inverse document frequency, right? It's based on the assumption that the more often a term, I'm trying to think how to say this best, the more often a term occurs in the document, right, the more it's representative of its content, which I will be honest, as a researcher, makes me slightly nervous when I'm looking at news articles. So in looking at news articles, I would rather use a filter, as I showed you today, than thinking about TF-IDF, because I think in news articles, I'm not 100% confident that that's as true as in other kinds of documents.
Why is the proximity plot your preferred tool?
I find proximity charts very interesting because, I'm sorry, I'm not sharing here. Proximity chart is as let me, sorry, back up. I got TF-IDF in my head looking at that sheet I just showed you. I love proximity charts because they let you take a word that you think is one of the most important, right? Abortion, right? And let you really see what the journalists who are speaking and writing about it think, right, relates to it best. Because I think that gives you a picture, almost as that TF-IDF concept we were talking about, right? It gives you more a sense of where the document is at and where the news is and what direction it's moving in. More importantly, I use it to compare. I look at news sources and compare them. And I find that the proximity chart gives you an incredible idea of how the news compares, especially because we tend to think that major newspapers are major newspapers, local newspapers are local newspapers. It's not true. The project my friend's working on, he's seen incredible differences when he puts in abortion, even across Mississippi, Arkansas, and Texas local newspapers. So I prefer proximity mostly because I use it as a comparative tool.
Okay, what about, I'm sorry, I have to go. Do you ever use correspondence analysis? Would you recommend it for analyzing dyads?
I will be honest, and because I'm going to be honest here, I haven't used dyads very much, so I'm not the best person to answer that question.
Okay. Assumptions are there to be challenged. I note that in your abortion example, doctor, medicine, death, life, ethics apparently were not found. Is that true or interesting?
I found it to be interesting, actually. I really thought, because when you listen to the abortion debate of the past, it was more about, killing babies. And I found the absence of that language incredibly interesting. And I think it showed a lot about the development of the abortion debate. So yes, that's a great question, because I found that incredibly interesting. Can I bring up something, Tony? Is that okay?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
It's your presentation.
Yes, but you're in charge, always. I'm sorry. Let me bring up that slide. I'm sorry, I'm looking for the right slide here. Looking for that new frequency, the second frequency chart. So we see life there, but if we saw, I was really more interested in the word restrictions, right? And weeks and ban. So the debate was much more about the kind of the details of what was going on, right? The viability of the baby, a ban, a heartbeat, fetal, that type of thing, rather than this is about killing babies. So that's a great question, because it's a very, very interesting finding.
Okay. What are your thoughts on keyword and context for understanding use of word frequencies? How about phrases?
Keyword and context I use probably, I don't know, more than proximity charts, probably as my key function. I find that it's incredibly important to use keyword and context, especially when you're coding, right? So what the tools I showed you today, especially in the second part, cut down the data to the point where it makes coding much easier. But I use keyword and context almost probably every day that I use Corvallis. I can't think of an example when I haven't used keyword and context. That right click, that's why I mentioned that right click function is probably the best thing this guy's, I don't know, you guys offer a lot of great stuff, Tony, but it's one of my favorite things you guys offer compared to a lot of other programs.
Okay, a more general question. Can you comment about sort of how language and control of language affects today's political debate vis-a-vis your look into abortion, for example, death panels, etc.?
Oh, wow, that's a big question. There's digging into my political communication knowledge, right? The ability, Tony, can you say the first part of the question?
Well, a general question, but what have you discovered about how language and the control of language affects, today's political discourse? For example, the use of death panels, etc. Or did you discover any of that in your research about abortion?
I find that in every type of research I do, actually, about political discourse. The ability to control the debate is everything. The ability to control what we call things, name things, is the most powerful ability we have in political communication. Including my advisor used a great example the other night at an awards ceremony. He said, what's the name of the president's bill that's currently being debated in Congress? And it was a room full of political scholars, and no one knew the name, but everybody knew it's a $3.5 trillion bill. And that's what the media calls it, a $3.5 trillion bill. So to be able to name it that, right, has controlled the debate, because they've gotten the press to call it. And I heard a Democrat call it the $3.5 trillion bill the other day in the media. As a Democrat, it frustrated me. I went, are you kidding? The big lie, it has been one of the most successful Democratic namings of anything, maybe in the history of anything. I'm amazed how much they've gotten everybody to say it's a big lie, it's a big lie, it's a big lie. So the ability to control what things are named and decide what things are called, death panel, is, the power to do that is beyond any other power I think people have out there.
Okay.
The President Trump, right? His ability to get everybody to say exactly what he was saying, right? The election was a sham, the election was a fraud, right? All of that, incredibly powerful.
And how, and could you explain sort of how WordStat can help you identify how WordStat can identify these terms and particular features that it helps you with?
Yes, I use Phrase Finder to look for those terms in an amazing amount. I use Phrase Finder, and once I have the phrases that I want to check, I build a dictionary of names. And I'm gonna talk about that in my quotes lesson, actually, how to find names. And I do a rule matching the names and the phrases. So I do a list of phrases in the dictionary, I do a list of names, and I do a test to see how they match up. And that gives me a level to see what phrases are being used by who, and what's caught on and what hasn't. I'm telling you, the other day hearing a Democrat say 3.5 trillion and name the bill that was astounding.
Okay, two questions. I'm not sure about this second one because it's a bit long, but the first one is, do you prefer proximity plot analysis over multidimensional scaling? Do you have a particular preference for either one, or do you use both, or how do you use them?
I use proximity almost always over multidimensional for two reasons. One, because most of the work I do with clients are clients who are not researchers. My doctoral students are, but most of my other clients are people who are at nonprofits and political offices, and I'm working with a congressional office right now looking at the media coverage of their congressman. And I find multidimensional scaling is just so far above their understanding that it's not a useful tool. So in the work I do, I find that proximity charts translate better to quote unquote normal people, non-researchers.
Okay. Do you have a preferred source or sources for examining existing data? For example, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, etc. Where do you go to get your data?
Oh, it depends on the project. Currently, I'm doing a project, my first really big Twitter project. So I'm doing a big Twitter project for Generation Xer. I'm telling you, I wasn't a Twitter user actually, so it's been a learning lesson and a great one. For media coverage, I used to be a completely LexisNexis user. And then LexisNexis seemed to have a fight with some media companies, including the Washington Post, which is very frustrating for us researchers. So that forced me over to ProQuest, which I honestly don't find as user-friendly as I did LexisNexis. So honestly, I wish I had one answer to your question, but it so depends on the project I'm doing.
Okay. You didn't mention or you did mention dictionary building, but you didn't get into it particularly. Just a general.
There's a lesson,
no,
Tony, one of my lessons on your website is about dictionary building.
Right. No, okay. Say that again, please.
One of my lessons on your website and on my website is dictionary building.
Okay, perfect. So you can go to either your website. Oh, you did a webinar on dictionary building, but I guess the question is for the people who are here today is, at what point do you begin dictionary building in the research?
At a point where I know this is not the answer people are looking for, but at a point where I feel I know the data. I mean, people laugh, my colleagues laugh at me even a little bit about how much time I really will spend wandering around the data before I start, but usually a day or two. I mean, I spend a good amount of time looking at the data, taking endless notes, and then I get into dictionary building.
Okay, and just to be clear to the person who asked that question or anybody on the call, you can go back to the webinar page on the Provalis research website, and you can see Abby's webinar on dictionary building. Also, we have our own webinars on dictionary building that were done by Norma. And you can also go to Abby's website with research spelled correctly. Are there any other?
Tony, can I jump in there?
Sure.
That's something I do. I give lessons, like I sit with you and your data and help you build a dictionary. That is something I do. it's funny. I bet Tony at the beginning, Normand would say, I don't know, that I was, a little hesitant on all of the dictionary, and I've become the biggest dictionary builder out there. I really believe in it as a research tool.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions? We seem to be.
I want to look at my chat and say, there seems to be some questions here. Hold on, Tony, on my chat.
Oh, your chat. Okay.
I did that one. Correspondence plot. I talked about that. I know that in your portion, I answered that. I just want to make sure I answered all the questions, Tony.
Oh, there's one here that I didn't get to. Is there any recommended reference paper explaining this strategy, your strategy?
The strategies I mentioned today, no, actually, this is the first time I've actually pulled them all together. I probably should think about writing a reference paper, but this is the first time I pulled all of these tools together in my head and really thought about how they work in conjunction with each other. It was a good lesson. I've spent the last 2 to 3 days thinking about this, so it's been a good lesson to think about how I use Corvallis and how I've learned to use tools in an innovative way. But is there anybody else out there with questions? Please text Tony.
Yeah, text me, or you can also text or email directly to Abby later on. I'm sorry if you're going to hear a barking dog, but I'm working from home and my dog is barking at something.
Oh, Tony, I can't believe my cats haven't thrown anything off tables. Every time I'm teaching, my cats throw things off tables.
Okay.
Today it's very dark here. We're about to have a storm, so maybe that's why they're asleep. But I can't believe there was no crashing behind us.
Okay.
Tony, can I add one more thing about this?
Please go ahead.
Okay, two things. Well, two things. One is, if anybody else has innovative ideas they're using, they should share them with Corvallis. Absolutely, you should share them with me, because maybe I will write a paper and talk about the innovative different ways. Because I have found, working with my own colleagues, that after you use the program for a while, and I bet Normand and maybe Tony will vouch for me, there are things you do you don't even think about you do. There are different ways you approach projects that maybe no one else is doing. I've been at conferences where people have told me things they do with Corvallis programs. I go, I never thought of that. So as a Corvallis community, it's really good for us to share what we're doing and have us learn from each other. So I really wanted to encourage everybody out there to share your ideas, share your innovations. I didn't do the dictionary thing because I had already done it today. And I didn't get into the quotes thing because I was a little worried it would go over and Tony would be rightly cutting me off. So that will be up on my website, my Facebook page, email me, send a pigeon, however you'd like.
Okay. Oh, what are the features? Are there any other features? Okay. Are there any other features that I'll address this question to you, Abby, and I'll also throw this just out to everybody on who's participating in the webinar. But are there any other features that you would like to see in the future in QDA Miner or WordStat? That's to you, Abby, and is a perfectly acceptable answer. But if there are any, please mention them in 1 sec. And anybody on the call, or your colleagues, if you're using the software and there are things you would like us to do either differently or better or add new features, please get in touch with us through the contact us section of our website. And I can't put it on the screen but right now, but I'll just throw out my email address. It's pretty simple. It's firstname.lastname@provallisresearch.com. So it's tony.ross@provallisresearch.com, and feel free to email me with any of your suggestions, and and when you're speaking to your colleagues. So Abby, do you have any suggestions?
I think they're putting me on the spot, Tony.
Well,
I said friends with you and Normand. So
I said no, or I can't. Not at the moment is a perfectly acceptable answer.
And Tony, this is where the gentleman was seeing it, and he's right. There is an extra E there, and I apologize. There was an extra E. Okay. Right there. I apologize. My error. Well, two things I want to say about this. One is Tony and Normand have always been incredibly responsive to the team at George Washington when I was a member of it, and even now to my suggestions. There's something that, what do you guys call that? Supercode? I call it supercoding. Tony, I don't know what you guys call it. When you combine two codes together, I'm trying to remember what that's called. Combine, it is called combine. We call it supercoding at GW. That was an idea that my advisor one day, I'm sorry guys, I'm playing with my screen here. That was one thing my advisor came up with one day for a project we were working on, looking at, trying to remember, political conventions. So he wanted to have Republicans talk about healthcare, talking about Democrats, and the negative, like endless stream of variables. And I said to him, it doesn't do that. And we went to Normand and we talked to him. And he rightly said, I have to investigate this and figure out other people other than you guys will use it, because although we like you, you're not the center of the universe, which we're not. And so they are incredibly responsive. So I would encourage you to do it. What would I like?
Well, you can think about it and let us know.
Think about it. I don't know. And I think if I say, Normand might hit me. So I don't know.
Okay. Well, we can talk later. If there are no other questions, does anybody have any other questions? We're getting a lot of thank yous, and thank you for the thank you for joining everybody, and thank you, Abby, for doing this. I do want to hang on for 1 second, please, before you leave, because I do want to mention that just about our next Lunch and Learn series, which is going to be next week on Wednesday, September the 22nd, but it's going to be at a special hour. It's going to be from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern, not from 12 to 1 as we usually do it. And that's because the two presenters, who are David White and Lydia Pikyo-Chun, are in Australia. And so for them, the time difference makes it only possible for them to do it, in the late evening. So you can bring a glass of wine and come to it from 5 to 6. And I think the title is Use Stata and WordStat to Analyze Twitter Data to Assess Economic Sentiment. As always, you can go to the webinars learning section on the Provalis Research website to register for that and our other webinars. So far, we have 2 others that are scheduled for the fall, and I expect in the next week to 10 days we will be adding more. So
I want to jump in and say everybody should go to that one. I've seen David White present. I don't know the other woman, but David is so smart, and I plan to be there with bells on.
Okay. If there are no other questions, thank you very much. Abby, do you have any sort of parting comments or final things to say?
There's so much in Provalis. Keep learning, keep using every tool. I'm not lying when I say I spend time every week. It's on my calendar on Thursday afternoons to sit with the program and do more learning. So don't think you know everything until I don't think you can. I think Normand and Tony are still learning. So keep learning. And come back for more sessions. Thank you for coming to mine.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. And as I said, for the next webinars, of course, they're all free, as you already know. And tell your friends, and the next one will be next Wednesday, and go to our website to register. And as usual, we'll be sending you the email with the Zoom invitation the day before and a reminder the day of. And this recording of this webinar will be posted on our website. So thank you very much. Have a great day, and talk to you next week.
Bye, guys.